So when I looked at your chart, and as you know, you're a cusp, but the fact that it is a water fire cusp and the degree of it, and that at 29 degrees 33 some minutes where you are, it's such a profound number even right now, as Neptune is in Pisces at 29 degrees and some minutes, probably about right there at that exact juncture. And what happens is we are plowing through the delusions right now. We're letting go of things. We are at that cusp where you are. You're just like a crossroads of fire and water. And I just, very interesting chart. So I'm very, very honored that you're here and I'm able to interview a lovely Cancer Leo cusp on my channel. And Balam, just to start, tell me a few things about yourself. Really, just you and I right now, not in with other people, not in a group of company of other souls. Tell me a few words about yourself. What brought you to consciousness triangulation?
Oh, well, that narrows down the question a little bit because it was quite broad. I always find it hard when somebody asks me, please describe yourself, because it's hard, It's easier to look the other way than to look. But anyway, what brought me to this, I would say, having experienced both extremes of duality, like having gone through darkness as well as light in my life and have been blinded by both. I mean, darkness won't let you see, but light will also blind you. So, striving for that balance, for that equilibrium, after having experienced those two ends, I think is what has driven me to consciousness triangulation, to this path. And ultimately, it's what fuels my curiosity, right? I've always been like, I wouldn't say obsessed, but I've always had a strong and keen interest towards always speaking what's behind the veil, always questioning what's happening behind the surface, beneath the surface, not just stay with the face results that life gives me.
Very interesting, as you're rising Virgo, which I had mentioned to you in my message, that I swore to myself. I said, no way that he doesn't have a Virgo somewhere very strongly on the top, like sun or moon or rising, like somewhere on the top. And sure enough, the rising, because Virgo does that. Virgo wants to know the fine-tuned details of how something works. So that is so innately our blueprint, I call it, and in this case, of course, your astrological blueprint. One other thing that really connected me with your energetics right away is that I felt that you've experienced it. And this is really what I want to talk to you about today, the experience of it, how we grow with this organically, so that I guess we find more enlightenment, I'm going to want to say, or we grow in level of consciousness, or we ascend, how these processes really look in your life, Balam.
Well, first of all, I want to say that this is all my opinion. I mean, I'm the one answering the question, and I don't want this to be taken as truth or anything like that, because answering these types of questions might sound like if I knew it all. But believe me, I do not. These are just my own attempts at trying to comprehend what's going on, right? And what has worked for me. It's like this concept of pain, once again, of the chaos and order. Like, I don't wish chaos onto anyone, but I do wish the grace that comes afterwards if we're able to go through it. So I could not really say that things have to be a certain way, but I do feel that in life we have to go through the experiences in order to be able to connect with them, because we can only see what we have within ourselves.
Yeah.
So if it's not within, it won't reflect.
Yeah. We talked about it with another colleague of mine, a very esteemed Ayurveda doctor colleague of mine on my channel, just previous to this interview, that suffering is it's just connected to this process, no matter how we don't wish that upon anyone, but we do wish them to have the result, or in reverse, if they see the result, you know, they all feel that there has to be some sort of a, you know, let me give you 5 pointers of what you have to do for this, or let me give you 7 tips of what to do with that. And I'm feeling that that is not harmonious with new earth energetics and where we're going, and experiencing it is definitely a must. So this is an experiential learning process, right? We cannot
Most
just read
definitely, yeah.
about it.
Like from what you were saying, this types of 7 steps to overcome jealousy or stuff like that. For me, it's just a band-aid. It's a product that is just sold and consumed kind of in the same way the pharmaceutical industry plays a role nowadays. They do not go for the root of the cause. They go for the symptom of the cause. So this just perpetuates things and then ends up creating other problems from it. So by facing things, we can really find a lot about ourselves. And it's not that I'm trying to wish suffering onto anyone, but let's be honest. I don't believe there is a single human on this planet that has not experienced in one way or another their own version of suffering. So it's just about taking that which is already in our lives and trying to learn from it instead of running away from the pain, learning, okay, the pain is an alarm that is driving my attention to a certain point when it's physical. But the same way when it's psychological or emotional, it's calling for our attention. Something needs to be addressed there.
So much so. What do you think? I usually, when I talk about these this topic, you know, in general, whether consciousness or expanded awareness or all of that, is that I'm very engaged in the mechanics of the process. I'm very engaged with the fire and water line, as I had mentioned to you in earlier conversation. I'm very interested that we need to know how to operate both of those lines. I kind of use the analogy of a parachute, like, you know, how you kind of want to balance in the air. Then you need to make sure that you've got some sort of a harmonious movement between the two sides, you know. And then when we do that, then we can initiate from the root chakra really that ether energy that I usually would say that it's like, imagine like a spotlight light going upward, the kundalini, which is light in the vessel. And so that light is what we want to radiate so that we can help others also to be infused with enough vibratory value to wake up, is what I'm trying to say. I think now what I'm trying to say is for the people to wake up, you know, because this energy lies dormant until that suffering occurs.
Well, until something that pushes us to change occurs. Unfortunately or fortunately, that's what normally human nature drives us to, right? Like we don't go see a doctor until it hurts too much, or like it's until that suffering or that pressure is presented that we decide to step out of our comfort zone and try something new.
I think that that's our number one takeaway, Balam, you and I, and as a jaguar is crossing the bear's trail, you know, that we do need this torque, this energy, this pain for the transformational process to start in our system. So welcome it rather, and then it's much easier if you try to actually open your heart to it and welcome it and see the different perspectives. So that brings me to what I think I call the perspectives are more like the energetic portals. They're like dimensions, we would call them. And then you spin all of this with the densities of where you're at, literally your timelines. So would you believe that your density is your destiny?
That sounds like an interesting way to approach it. It's the first time that I hear this thought, so I'm just giving it some thought instead of just
I
giving a
made that
reactive
up just so
answer.
that you know. It was a legit download of mine from a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm testing it out on you first for the first time.
Our density is our destiny.
Mhm.
Hmm. Well,
It's
those big
crazy,
questions
right?
in life. Destiny, is destiny defined? Is like something already written? Our density is that which pulls us down to this state that it's already defined. I'd say more of our density is what makes us impulsive and reactive, is what might make a destiny that is already written down become that destiny.
Yeah,
But I also believe that we are writing our own destinies as we are going along. Because the other thing is that time is not happening chronologically, or at least from my perspective, it isn't. From the human perspective, it is, and that's the only way we have to understand it.
yeah.
But if everything is happening this very instant, like it doesn't matter what's going to happen tomorrow or what happened yesterday. What matters is how I am here in the now, which is the other thing that I want to mention about this waking up and the Kundalini that you were saying. When Ida and Pingala, these two serpents of the Kundalini, start playing around and dancing as they make their way up, and there's like the caduceus from medicine, you probably know this staff, the medicine staff, like it's duality that is dancing in this balance. So it's us learning to deal with these resonant points also along our bodies. And I believe it's not just about wanting or wishing our bests. It's a fine-tuned activity of dealing consciously with your energy. Because I'd say if I boil it down to the basic, it's all about energy. How much energy do you have? Is your energy refined, or is it just primal energy? We all are making energy. We eat food, and then through chemistry in our stomachs and whatnot, we create more energy. If
That's exactly where I'm coming from. So hold that thought, because where is the density? How do we hold to the density? I want to show you something in the interim, and we'll come back to it. I know that I kind of have to turn my camera. Okay, so do you see that red tapestry there?
yep, Idan Pingala, I assume.
Yeah, there you go. See, I got this from a friend from many years ago from Peru.
Wow, it's
And
beautiful.
ever since I loved it, and it's part of my home studio space. And I wanted to share that with you. Hold on, I'm just gonna bring the camera back in here. How, when I got that, I never understood what I understand today. So do you know what I mean? It's so interesting how I remember getting that tapestry because my friend Dave knew I love all kinds of tapestry and folklore material. And I love anything from peoples and cultures. And so I got this gift 25 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and I never really computed to it. And then since I have been in this world of, let's say, wellness, health, spirituality, occult sciences, and I'm doing my healing art in this container, I realized all along that this is a fire water line thing that is actually in every ancient technology and wisdom in every culture. And your background is Aztec, isn't it?
But I was born in Mexico. It's also, well, I would say more Mexica Tolteca is the
Huh?
school of knowledge that I come from. But Aztecs or Azteca, it's also, I mean, I guess it's correct in a way. The Mexicas were Aztecs before they were Mexicas.
There you go. It's just because, if let's just say we look at South America and then or Central America, or we look at native,
Yeah, the
indigenous,
different
or
tribes
we look
from.
at the Australian indigenous, or if we're looking at in all truthfulness in every single culture, like Mesopotamia, the Egyptians, so Ayurveda understands it, right? So definitely the Indus Valley and the ancient rishis and sages knew these messages. So if all of these civilizations all understand this message in their own way, they convey these messages in certain art or depiction of pictures or whatever that might be, then we know that there must be something there that we're all overlooking here. We're not looking in the right places, right?
Most definitely. I mean, we can call it however we want to call it, God, Allah, or Great Spirit, but there is a source. There is a when we when we shed all all that limits our mind, all our ideas, all our beliefs, then suddenly you can start perceiving things as they are. And from there, what I've found is the resonant approach to things, which is a word that I use a lot because resonance means for two elements that are tuned to the same frequency to be able to influence each other just by their own energy. So if you align yourself, if you tune yourself to a certain frequency, then you tune to this energy that's already taking place, and then this will resonate with you and you will connect with it. But it's different states of consciousness that, as I was saying, it's all defined by how much energy you have, which of course can be interpreted into 1,000 different ways. Like, for example, if I have a sexual desire all the time, then just by thinking about that, my energy is being drained, let alone to mention acting upon it. So you could say that this is your first chakra, first and second chakras that are not working properly, and they have like little holes. So all the energy that you're producing is not able to be retained, and it just drains out
As I
impulsively.
Yeah, and as I have to explain as a Reiki master to my clients that each and every point, imagine this donut of kind of energetic field around you that not just rotates but oscillates, and it requires a certain speed. And so if it's a decreased flow, it's not good. We don't want that. But if it's an increased flow, we also don't want that. So there has to be a certain vibratory value to this movement. And then when all of the points, which I have mentioned to you, I kind of refer to the chakra points, all of the chakras are all energetically clicking together, right? And they're kind of all beautifully, harmoniously moving, then all of the 7 will then allow, firstly, increased level of consciousness, expanded awareness for sure, but also to move light energy and rise in that frequency bandwidth where everything looks so differently. What I loved about your book, and for my viewers, I just want to say that you've got an excellent publication, the Consciousness Triangulation, by Balam, and I'm going to link it below in the description box for everybody to get. I am halfway through the book. I'm not going to lie, but I started making notes. And actually, this is the first Kindle book that I have read and annotated, and I actually love that feature because it's so easy for me to just go back to it and say, okay, what were my questions, or what are the sections that I particularly like. And one of the things that I love that you say here is about expanding awareness gradually without moving your eyes or changing your focal point visually. Expand your awareness to include your peripheral vision. So you're having an exercise here, which is what I'm talking about. This exercise in the book, and for all of you guys that are interested, by Balam's book and read the exercise and try it out, because it is really showing me how you experienced it, how you've gone through it, because I've gone through it. And so I know that exact way of coping, how you cope to try to see things in a different way, from a different perspective. So you're moving through these energetic portals, and that's how you're navigating into this ethereal space. And the more it balances your fire and water lines, the more this light energy, which carries information, will expand your peripheral vision. Your awareness is going to be so much wider, and so your understanding is going to grow, and all of that for sure with it. So tell me about yourself. When did the journey start?
When my mom and dad decided to get together and have a baby. But for me, at least on this plane, aware and conscious, I'd say when I was about 12, 13 years old, had a really intense experience. I was seeking, I had the curiosity what was needed in order to lose your mind. I had met someone that became crazy. and I couldn't understand what someone needs to go through in order to snap, to become crazy, or what people define as crazy. And yeah, I started pursuing lots of things, and I ended up meeting somebody that shared with me about a little over an ounce of mushrooms. Keep in mind, I was 13 years old at the time. And he failed to mention don't eat them all. He just said eat them. And
So sorry.
I ate over an ounce of mushrooms by myself, at least in a manner of respect. Each one that I ate, I defined an intention because he gave me some instructions. He just didn't say how much. I just assumed the whole bag.
Oh,
And they were tiny, right? Like, oh, little mushroom. What's the little mushroom's gonna do to me? So yeah, this kind of set me off into experiencing life from a perspective that I had never really I had heard about, because in my life my dad was always very physical and like from the normal everyday world. And my mom was always seeking spiritual experiences and was actually involved with the Carlos Castaneda movement. I don't know if you've heard of Carlos Castaneda or not, but
no,
if you
please
haven't,
share.
I invite you to look him up a little bit. He was an anthropologist from the 80s, 70s, 80s, that he went and he wanted to write about the peyote, peyote, and he ended up meeting this Yaqui Indian, and he ended up writing about all the teachings this Yaqui Indian gave him. The Yaqui Indian took him as his disciple and showed him the way of the Nahuales. So for some, he's just a novel writer. For others, he is actually like a teacher, like a proper teacher that people look up to with respect. And I was the child that was running around his conferences because I didn't care who he was. I was just a child, but my mom was really into all of that. So I always had that opening in my life. And when I was young, I also that's how I got to meet Lakotas, to meet Cheyenne. I remember a couple of Apaches that I met, and to listen to the singings, to be in some of the ceremonies, to be outside of a sweat lodge and see them all going through the sweat lodge, and being exposed to that world.
Mm.
So that mixed with also my roots from Mexico, like it or not, it's something that it makes me feel identified, or it made me as I was a child with all of that. Then the mushrooms, they're called Teonanacayatl, which means the sacred flesh of the gods.
Oh, wow.
So this is a word in Nahuatl, which is from the ancient culture. So for me, it was always like the modern world is kind of like going into hedonism and indulging into whatever, a plastic world. And it was the ancients that had more of this worthwhile knowledge, more profound perception of things. So that's what drove my curiosity into learning all I could from, not just from the Mexica Tolteca, but from all the tribes, like all the pre-Hispanic world. And I ended up spending time living with Huicholes up in the mountain, living with Lakotas, and living with people from all over the place, that each one of them shared a little bit of medicine with me throughout my path. But I'd say it was that mushroom journey when I was 13 years old that set me off. And then it was just my curiosity.
Wow.
Afterwards, I guess death has been my greatest teacher too. And I know this might sound creepy or dark, mention death, but I ask you this. If you knew you only had 10 more inhalations and exhalations left in your life, what would be the value of those breathing for you? As opposed to as if you think you have an infinite number of. Suddenly, those 10 last inhales you have, they're going to be worth gold, and you're going to be so grateful for having them. And you're going to cherish and enjoy and be as present as you've never been before in each one of those, because they're timed. So for the Toltecas, the belief is that death is standing right here at the length of my left arm extended. And all she has to do is tap my left shoulder. And that's it. I'm out. So as long as she hasn't tapped my left shoulder, there's still a chance. So it doesn't matter what you're going through. That will always be a reminder of like, there is still a chance. You're still here.
So interesting that you mentioned death, as the last few years of time, as I have deepened my water research, I have come to a discovery that I have not shared at all with the public yet. It's going to be the subject matter of my book that I'm already writing, and I've done all my research, and It has to do with inherited diseases and how we transfer the biospiritual information that we collect, you know, in each life, and then of course accumulatively, how that information data package travels into the next physical form of life, form of this soul particle, right? So then that would mean that it should empower us, because that means we have a say as to how we're forming this information database from one life to the next, through, of course, weaving in and out from, I guess, a three-dimensional form back to another ethereal form, and then come back maybe again. And until we need to learn, we keep coming back to clear and purify all that does not belong, until, let's say, that moksha liberation is achieved. So for me, I know what you mean with this, how from your perspective you're explaining it with death, and how I see it from my perspective, from my work. It's not that scary as, you know. I think what's scary, which, like, I'm just gonna put it out there, do not do the black. If once I'm going, please don't, like, spare me and just don't do it. Like, don't do the black, and don't do the wailing and the moaning and the all of that. So I think that part is much more scary to us than the actual act of how the soul then travels further.
Most definitely. Like sometimes we have ideas of things, which is the other thing that I mentioned in the book about achieving the no form state. All the ideas that we have are shaping the way that we see our reality. If you like or dislike anything about anyone, it's based on an idea that's embedded and rooted in you. It's you're identifying with it. That's why you don't like it. So yeah, the ego doesn't like to hear that, but it's up to us, you know, like we have the power to change that idea. The issue is that with time, let's say if I spend 30 whatever years explaining life a certain way to me and it has worked so far, why would I change it? To accept a new idea would be to invalidate my previous view of the world, to accept that I was wrong. And the ego definitely does not like that. It's like, where's all my sense of worth? You know, like I've heard investigative scientists and whatnot that the moment that a new theory is shown, they cannot go and say, "Oh, actually, yeah, that's right." You know, like this guy has he's right, because that means that all my work, all my lifelong work is wrong. And suddenly it becomes worthless. But if we take away all that importance and just look at it as lenses, as we used to understand the world, we can change them. We
Right?
can.
That perception, that our own filter system is how we look at and process all the information. So just because our perception only allows a certain perspective in, that doesn't mean that that's all there is. You know, there's a bunch of other things out there, but we might not see it. But when we kind of shift and go through these energetic portals, they allow us to see always these different perspectives as we travel in what I associate this with, really truly, with the Merkaba, with the light vessel, because that's how we travel in this in light vessel machinery. It's also a vehicle. It's a vehicle that takes us to different places. So I think that there are more and more of us out there that are learning how to navigate this vehicle. And what I also love in your book is when you just said that you're not just sharing the technique with people so that they do the technique, that you're sharing it so that they come to realization. They have to realize themselves these processes. And I sat with a few ladies yesterday, actually, in a Zoom room where we had we called it mentor to mentor networking grid, like, you know, professional light workers, if you will. And we were actually exchanging thoughts and ideas, and as to how to really communicate our messages while being able to still, what am I gonna say, not monetize, but get the energetic exchange
Reciprocity.
fair, right? For services we render for in the arts of healing, of all kinds of different, healing modalities. And we also kind of realize that these new tools that we need are almost like are being created now as we're all going through this process of this new energetics, of this new earth energetics, as we're kind of leaving densities behind, because there's a lot of folks I personally know that are doing a lot of work, right? So we're leaving things, we're cleansing the different points of densities out of our biofield, out of our physical life, out of the body, out of our circle of maybe friendships or people, sometimes even that needs detoxification or purification and so on and forth. So tell me about, how do you feel as someone who was born in Mexico, with your identity forming, changing, and your consciousness, how did that form by you moving to actually Canada?
Well, I've always been Canadian as well. I was Canadian since birth, even though I was born in Mexico. So my dad's side of the family is Canadian, and my mom's side of the family was Mexican. So it was always like I was born into both worlds, even though I grew up down there. So for me, it's been about almost like becoming a bridge. Because from one end, I have this indigenous root and this indigenous curiosity and like this like deep spiritual like loving for all of this. But on the other hand, I also grew up, my dad was a race car fan and he loves race cars and I love race cars, even though it's burning gas and goes against lots of different beliefs and whatnot. But it gave me the perspective that I needed. So now I feel I can play the role of a bridge for most people. For people that are on that race car world, I can extend the bridge into that other world and be like, hey, there's something over here too, right? And that's another thing that I want to mention, that it's also not about trying to be a leader or anything like that, or trying to go out and heal people, because just by wanting to go out to heal people, you're seeking recognition. Even though you can say like, oh, it's my humbleness, like no, it's the moment that you get to a certain vibrational point within you, as you're saying, the keys or dimension, so to speak, you start vibrating on a certain level, you will not be attracted to recognition at all. And at the same time, you will start realizing things like, okay, maybe I am connected to this plane of energy in which I can move light energy. And with this light energy, like that's the blinding of light, because you feel that power and you're like, whoa, what can I do with this power? And I remember trying to help somebody once that I saw that she had a huge rock inside of her. Like I could see in my trip, I was not on drugs, by the way, or anything like that, but I could see this black, like obsidian like rock, but it was opaque. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it. And I felt so lit up at that time from what I was going through in the state that I was at, that I took it as a challenge. I was like, oh, you absorb light. Well, I have a ton of light. Let's see how much you can absorb. And this all took place in between this other woman and me, just looking into each other's lives, eyes for 10 minutes. We didn't say a word. Like I asked permission of her spirit, but internally before I tried to do so. And I started like pushing, projecting all the light that I could onto this stone. Yes, the stone eventually broke. And when it broke, she broke into tears like I hadn't ever seen before. But the problem is that those tears then turned into anger, and that anger turned directed at me. The first thing she said is, how dare you? It took me 15 years to repress all that, and you think you can come here and release it all in 15 minutes? Who the do you think you are? And she left my house shouting at me all the insults you could think of, and have never heard of her again. She will never see me again. She says that I am this demon that just messed
Oh,
in ways
wow.
that I shouldn't have. And even though my whole intent was coming from love, was coming from, I see this being that I care about, and I see this thing that is blocking her energy from flowing, I'm going to break it.
Oh, wow.
So
You
for
know,
me, it's realizing that no, That's my ego wanting to be like, oh, you're the healer and you healed her.
Mm,
Try to look further past that. You know, if somebody has cancer and they have this tumor,
mm.
you might have the power to take that tumor away. But by doing so, you're taking their opportunity of healing themselves and working through what they're going through in life away from them too. Once again, I don't wish you
So
suffering, but I
amazing.
wish you the grace afterwards.
This is exactly, I think, what we captured yesterday in that Zoom room, that I think where we all are feeling this frustration. I've never had an issue of making how to make money in my legal practice. I made like, I never looked for business either. I never really even advertised for business. That's how much it was just like coming. I was like, so now in this other field, if you will, and at this juncture in my soul growth journey, just doesn't feel right. So I know that consciously, I'm aware that I'm not even trying to do certain things, or I'm not utilizing certain tools that I would associate with those three-dimensional constructs, because they just don't seem harmonious with me. And I know what you mean, because like a healer, right? Like this was also a conversation yesterday, that do we really have to say it? We're just too I do Orshism. I call it, if anything else, or people call me all kinds of Orshism and all that kind of jazz. And maybe that's just what it is. And this is exactly why I'm not able to formulate what I'm expecting in my conscious mind, because it doesn't work anymore conceptually, based on exactly what you're saying. And that people all need to do the job themselves. That's the other thing. So if they're all, I guess the only thing we can do is to maybe guide, if they wish guidance, for them to navigate better, you know.
Contain a safe space for them. But also, I'd like to mention, like, for example, the Lakota that I stayed with, he was very adamant about this point, but he hated those who would just go to ceremonies or go to a sweat lodge to get cleaned and detoxified and whatnot. But the next day afterwards, they were partying and getting drunk out there in town once again. He's like, this is not a show. This is not spiritual theater, right? Like people need to show that commitment from their end as well, and
That's so true.
it works both
Again,
ways.
I want to do justice by these ladies yesterday, because, and you, for bringing this home together for me, because that's exactly what we said. And one of the ladies from the UK said that there might be much more fake, frequency out there, that you might think that people they feel that they need to meet that expectation of, now we have to all be high frequency and high vibe. So then, of course, like I just need to play that I'm such a high vibe. But eventually, at the end of the game, like you say, they need space to experience themselves what they have to go through. And we can't really interfere with that process anymore. So those old constructs, for this reason, will never hold.
It will not work, and that brings me to also the point of faith, and not from a religious perspective, but I see faith as the strength of the heart. So I don't know, I do the readings about the sunstone, but I also have this rule that they cannot have a price. Even if you ask me, what's the price? I will not give you a price. The price, if you want to give it a price, is whatever you feel it's reciprocate if you want to donate something. But I will not put a price on it. Anyway,
I love that, because you mentioned you're reading the sundial. I wanted to ask you about this. I did watch your podcast or whatever it was on that channel. I forget their name. Insider.
inside timer, yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really awesome. Like I enjoyed it, like every minute of it. And I'd love you to tell me more about it, and actually for my viewers as well, about the sundial and how you read that. Tell us a few things about that whole system.
Of course, I'd love to. Just let me finish up with the other one that I was saying. And even though I don't charge for it, like I don't worry about what am I gonna do to eat. The way that I see it is I have faith that if I give myself into the service, the Great Spirit, life itself, will find a way for me to be able to keep on doing that. If I seek my personal benefit, then that's where think gets truncated. When, oh, I'm gonna make money by selling mushrooms, and yeah, it's not gonna work. But if I decide to share medicine, like in the ceremonies that we've been doing, mushrooms, I've been offering them. I'm not charging for them, but, and that's part of that abundance. You get what you give. So, on the other hand, about the sundial or the sunstone, it's this. You probably it's for the viewers. You guys probably heard of this as the Mayan calendar, wrongfully called, or the Aztec calendar, which it's half and half rightly called. But it's this huge stone that's down there in Mexico City, a 30-ton stone that depicts the face of the sun, and there's a lot of misinformation around it. Some of it that used to be used as the sacrificial stone, and they would open people's chest and pull their hearts out and then put the hearts into the mouth or the center of the stone for some reason. This is all, sorry for the word,
Right.
uh, built by the Spanish so that they would be able to justify their enslaving or liberation of the barbarians that lived over here, right? But none of that really took place. They took some of the rituals that happened here and they blew them out of proportion. But this sunstone, it's basically the sundial. I'd say a symbolic representation of their culture and how their culture perceived reality.
Mhm.
In all aspects, physically, metaphysically, like from the spiritual side and from they would refer to this as the tonal and the nahual, our physical side and our spiritual side. And within it, I've seen a reflection of what I've experienced in my life. Patterns. I tend to seek for patterns all the time. I'm looking for patterns that repeat themselves everywhere. And that sunstone is filled with those patterns everywhere. Not just the ones that I've found, but the ones that were originally defined and passed on through the spoken word. I'm sure there's thousands more that I'm ignorant to. But it's a count of time they used to have. And by the readings, I correlate which day you were born in that calendar and our calendar, the Gregorian one, to determine not just like what's your sign, because that's what most people would go down to, like what's my sign, like the zodiac sign. And that's why I say the word symbol, because a sign has a defined meaning. A symbol is open to interpretation.
May I
And
show you something?
yes, please. Oh, nice. From the Mayans.
This is my birth certificate that I got done. Apparently, it's my birth certificate. And I want to show you because I know what you mean by the symbols. But anyways, this is just a super cool thing that we can just show the folks. It is a personal information, but you know what else? I don't mind sharing it. I don't think so many people can read this.
Yeah, I don't think many would understand what the symbols mean, represent.
Right? So this is super cool. I got it done
Thank you
in
for sharing.
2012, which at time, everybody thought that the world is gonna end or that
Their
the
long count did
calendar of
end.
not, right? But that's when I actually went down and I was on the Mayan Riviera. And that's when I went to see a couple of Mayan villages and spent time with the Indigenous down there. And it was just an absolutely fantastic experience. And this is where it was offered that I can get this done. And so, I mean, obviously, I can't read it, but tell me about these symbols.
Well, first of all, like I said, some of you might know the sundial that I'm referring to as the Mayan calendar, but there are two different cultures, the Mayan and the Mexica Toltec. Like down there in the peninsula of Yucatan, it was the land of the Mayas. But if you go a little bit further up north in Mexico, that was the land of the Mexicas. And even though their cultures are quite similar, they were different. So this symbols, what you just showed me, is 100% Mayan, and I actually like it because there's also this other calendar going around, which is the Kin Maya by Jose Argüelles, which became extremely popular among New Age people along those dates, 2012 and whatnot. And he claimed this as a Mayan calendar, as a Mayan count of time made by the pre-Hispanic ancestors. But once again, it's just a bunch of That one that you showed me, like the symbols that it depicts or how it's represented, they have this count, this calendar that is made up by 20 months of 13 days. So within the symbols, they are representing the month that you were born in, the day that you were born in within that month, but at the same time, they're representing the year that you were born in, and they have different counts. Um, I think they would be referred to as the cuenta larga and the cuenta corta, the long count and the short count, which for the Mexicas would be the Xulpohualli and the Tonalpohualli. There's also a longer count, but that's thousands of years. It's more for cosmic cycles. And it's a correlation between the sun calendar and what some interpret as the moon calendar. They interpret this because it's made up by 20 months of 13 days. So having this 13-day cycle aligns with the moon. Um, but it's not necessarily tied to the moon. It's just these two calendars that are playing in unison, that they start the same day. And funny enough, 52 years later, they will sync back up again on that same day. Mm-hmm. Like these two dials. One is made up of 18 months of 20 days, 360, and then 5 days at the end. Every 4 years, it's 6 days. They call these days Nemontemi. And then the other one is called Tonalpohualli, 20 months of 13 days, which are 260, so 100 days less. So they would go like out of sync and sync back up every 52 years. Every 52 years, there is a repetition of the position of the stars in relation to the Earth. I wouldn't say exactly the same because there is minuscule change. Like the actual exactly the same would take thousands of years. But there is a repetition of these cycles every 52 years, which for them were 4 blocks of 13 years. So all of this is depicted on which year you were born in the sun calendar, in the other calendar, in the Tonalpohualli, but from the Mayan perspective.
Yeah. Just like in even astrology, if you think of that, and we'll go back to the sundial in just a moment, is that, there's the Vedic, and then the Vedic looks at it differently, and the Vedic looks more of the moon, and, there's the nut chakras, and then so that's different. I think there's 27 of them, and so there's these different areas of life, or, while in Western tropical, again, is very differently, so the numbers are also different. But like you said about the sundial, that I guess it is their perception of how they perceived life, and right?
Yep. I'd say the sun and the 20 rays of the sun around it, because the Mayan culture, the same as the Mexica culture, they both have this symbol carved in stone that has 20 symbols around it. And each one of those symbols, they're the same, basically. Like one of the sunstone talks that I did, the ones you mentioned, I made like a correlation telling you the symbol in Mexica, in Maya, and in Zapoteco, because the Zapotecas also had a count of time. So these three cultures, they all had 20 symbols that were the same thing, just called differently. And they all function under the same mathematics of 1320, hence the frequency 1320.
So when you read the sundial, what information, like, what am I saying? It's basically, it's about the entire culture's view of life. Is it like almost like, okay, like a Bible? It would be like their summary of wisdoms, or would it be like the Vedic texts? How would you interpret that for us?
Well, if we compare it in that manner, like the example you gave me, I'd say it's a chapter inside a text, because it's part of thousands of different visual representations of. And in the Mexica culture, as long as many pre-Hispanic cultures, there was no written word whatsoever. It was the Spanish that came and started writing it. So that's why there's no spelling, no proper spelling for it. Some write it with H, some write it with G, some write it with K, with C's, whatever, right? But yes, I'd say this one would be one of the main parts. Like you don't end up doing a 30-ton stone out of nothing. It's the biggest one for sure found. And also the way that it was made, people don't really understand. Like if you go through an anthropologist today, they will be like, well, we can't really explain why it doesn't have any tool markings. If it was carved with a hammer and a chisel, we don't get it how it doesn't have any tool markings. or the fact that it's two different types of stones, that this huge disc is embedded onto a different type of stone that is like broken up, and the design from the disc goes into the other stone, almost like if the other one was made soft, the other one placed inside and then solidified somehow, like put into concrete. So it doesn't make sense, and they're showing you through their worship, through their ability as well, like they understood different principles that we don't fully get. And it's just the vast amount of coincidences that you'll find if you start searching for patterns. Like it has 18 rings if you count from the center towards the outside, the same as the earth. The earth has a molten core in the center, and if you start counting each layer until you get to the crust, then you get to 18 layers. I don't think it's a coincidence. Yeah, it's 18 rings, but if you use them as a band of rings, they're 9. So you've got the sun and 9 planets around the sun. I don't think that's a coincidence either.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I watched a documentary yesterday, or actually, I'm not gonna lie, I fell asleep on it. It was a really long one though, and I started to watch about, honest to God, I'm not even sure how I got to this link. That's how weird last night was for me. But it gets into this link, and then before I know, I'm listening to this YouTube video on flat earth basically. But the whole documentary, what I'm trying to refer to is that there are all these architectural phenomena all throughout the world, as you know, from the pyramids to more recent ones, like let's say the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. And they were showing the carvings that are not carved. They're not carved in there. There's like a different way of how these depictions are appearing in that stone. There's a technique to it they explained, but I can't really quite convey the same message back to you properly. But the idea is that the stones are huge. They're multi-ton in weight. They didn't have the tools. They did not have. Even today, it would be a biggie to move certain pieces like that. So if they didn't have the tools, they didn't have power tools, they didn't have power equipment, they didn't have then how are all of, and then the pyramids, and then like you say with the actual pictures on this sundial as well, it is then, where is all this coming from? I guess it is an interesting question.
Most definitely, and it's one that has intrigued me most of my life. Finding the answer to all of this. Closest that I've come to it would be sound, vibration. That's the basis of it all.
So tell us, what was the purpose at the end for your book?
For my book, well, the purpose for my book was to synthesize, in a way, create like a converging and diverging point, as the sum of what I've gone through, and looking at it from the perspective of what has actually helped me grow. I've learned from lots of different schools of thought, of knowledge, and I've tried many different things throughout my life, and some have worked, some have gotten me even more lost than I was before. But from the conclusions that I can draw from all that, I wanted to create a simple conceptual mind frame, so to speak, so that like consciousness triangulation 0, 1, 2 creates the 3, so that it's simple and easy to share this, or like with exercises like the one you mentioned about becoming aware of your surrounding visual, while focusing on one point. Most people will suddenly realize in the middle of these exercises, like, whoa, I haven't been thinking for a while. Like my mind has been quiet because I've been too busy feeling, experiencing things. So I'd say that's the intent, would be to help anyone that is seeking, and anyone that is starting, as well as people that are already in the path. It'll be a reminder. But at the same time, I could say I do not much but repeat the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again for the entire book. Because everything that I've said there has been said before in different ways. I'm not saying I'm bringing here this enlightened piece of work that's going to open your mind to everything. It's going to help you in the measure that you want to help yourself. We get what we give.
it's your own organic way of putting this work together. Just like me too, I did not invent the miracles of water. But when I research it, obviously it was my unique understanding from all the different things I do and modalities of what actually the power is that I actually per se have not seen written anywhere else. So I'm curious what the public, will say when they read it at the time. So and then the other idea which I love about this is that this is like you took your mind, your thoughts, reverse engineered it down to a 1 or 2D surface, and then I get the book or I get the Kindle, and then I take that 1 or 2 dimensional
you can up it
thing
back again.
and then I upload it here. So that kind of transfer is phenomenal.
I like that.
Yeah, I thank you so much, and I so love talking to you. And honestly, I think we got to do just chats if you're up to it, and then
More
we
than up to it.
record here and there as we are inspired. I believe that that's very important rather than for us to be forcing any kind of conversation. But I still will just in closure for today, I just want to kind of bring you back, and I'll pick at you and at these subject matters all from here on in forever. Okay, so
And please feel free to do so.
consider a student. I'm there, but the fact that you're this true at the cusp fire water person, which the significance of that for you personally, by the way, because this is your astrological blueprint, but also for me and for the viewers, how awesome that is to know that when someone finds their purposeful life, like you have found something that's such a purposeful being for you to serve with, is lying in your astrological panel, because you create with the fire and the water the perfect steam, if you will, that will get these processes going. So I guess in the name of Kundalini, because that's what it is all about, rising the light, bringing more energy, not even energy, but yes, prana, because life force energy, but all of that also carries information. And so that brightness, the intellect, right? So that is the buddhi, we call it. Like it's absolutely wonderful, and it's right in your chart. So it is something that's been destined for you if your density is right. And that's the thing that I want to say to you as well as to the audience, that I guess when you achieve it, when you earn it back from previous life journeys, you've got all of this information package already in you because you carried it in your blueprint already. So obviously it's been there. It's been there. You've already grown to it, but it's almost like you got to re-earn it by finding the bandwidths. And then when you get that frequency bandwidths, you can only achieve it with certain things like nutrition, hydration, eating the right way, detoxifying physical body, the mind, and the soul and all of that. And the lighter that you become, the more you can spin this vehicle, and then the more you can come to your purposeful life. So I'm very grateful that actually the solar eclipse brought you actually into my life. And so it's always an auspicious time for me. Like I told you, April 11th-ish. And then, oh no, not that. That one was the first one. You came on the second one. What was there? Because that was also an astrological event on that date. It was new moon something.
It was 2 weeks after the 2nd of April eclipse.
Was, I know that it was an auspicious time for sure. It was a May new moon.
It was at the end of Yeah, at the beginning of May, I think second or third week of May.
Yes, the nevertheless, for sure, it was cosmic. It was cosmically always, it happens for a purpose, for a reason. And so I'm so glad that you found your purpose as
I'm so
I
glad to have found you guys
and
too.
we can intertwine all of this and take it all to another level in our next interview. So stay with me still, Balam, but I'm gonna finish the recording for all of you peeps, and I will be putting the link, like I said, below. So please purchase the book. It's worth every single word of it. Okay, namaste, you guys. Bye.